Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey, Leonid, how are you?
How are you today?
Doing good, doing good. I'm out on the West Coast in the Seattle area. Where are you located?
I'm out in the East Coast in the Philadelphia area, between Philadelphia and Princeton.
Awesome. I got to ask you, because we're going to talk about, some of the important metrics that companies should use when they're judging the success or lack thereof for localization projects. We're also going to talk about some of the effects of AI, both on the localization industry in general, but also maybe more specifically in game localization. Before we get into all that, though, I got to ask you, I was looking at your profile, and you have, from what I see here, a PhD in relativistic electron beam propagation, computer simulation, and using the macroparticles method, which is your PhD degrees in physics and math. Let me ask you, how do you go from getting a PhD in physics and math to working in the language industry and to running a localization company? Because a lot of times we think that people are, you have this part of your brain that's physics and math, and then you have a different part of your brain that's language related.
I have to repeat, and I'm sorry for those who have already heard this story. But the thing is, I was working in the so-called Star Wars program that was popular under the Reagan administration. But then the Soviet Union collapsed. There was detente everywhere. Everybody was happy. So the eternal enemy of mankind disappeared, regrettably not for long.
Yeah.
But at that time, the interesting part was all those scientists working in that area, or many of them, on both sides of the pool, they lost their jobs because there were cuts. Sounds familiar?
Yeah.
We thought that would exist in a peaceful world ever after. No one needs so many scientists working on expensive, far-reaching new weapon programs, especially when the ultimate perspective of them getting involved is kind of murky at best. So we had to reinvent ourselves. And at that time, I thought, okay, there is one nascent technology that I've heard about from a friend of mine, which was called localization, which sounds cool because on one hand, it uses computers. It requires some technical knowledge. And at that time, it required considerably more technical know-how than today because tools were not as advanced. Internet was actually just beginning for the masses and was not even widely used at the workplace. And also because it used language, because it was international, which sounded cool right from the start. I mean, you work with people all around the world, so why not?
Awesome. Well, I got to, hats off to you for being able to make that very significant pivot. You just went completely onto a different track, and you've been running Logos now, I think, for something like 28 years or something. So it's amazing. Let's get into the metrics discussion. I've run LSPs in Asia, and I've been involved with the language industry here in North America. And different customers, some customers, they just look at the invoice you send them every month, and that's their metric, right? And then and some of them wanted some kind of quality metric. What are some best practices for creating metrics and maybe even like customizing them by your customer or by project?
Okay, so I apologize up front because I'm sipping coffee and you have a withdrawal syndrome.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll live vicariously through your sipping of coffee, but go ahead.
Yeah, anyway, there is no such thing as a universal metric. Well, first of all, because different customers have very different needs, and the emphasis could be varying to a large degree depending on what they want to achieve. Plus, there are plenty of tasks, starting from creating new content, meaning blog content, articles that highlight this or that aspects of the customer services, or it's just plain localization of something very mundane and very boring, or it's something creative as a computer game. Mm-hmm. And you need to learn the history, you need to understand the underlying history of characters, their development, whether they are, say, grumpy or extremely happy all around, or just boring, whatever. Sometimes, okay. I mean, for special languages, it's even the question of whether it's a he or a she or a they. And you do not know right from the start because the name of the character doesn't specify it. So there is no single metric. And that's exactly why I, as a person who kind of created this particular area of Logrus IT, and I hope helped popularize the whole idea in the localization world, if I may be trying to be humble here. Anyway, I insist on using multidimensional customized metrics. There is no universal metric. It's absolutely naive to assume that there is a metric that would suit anyone and everyone, including both customers and ourselves when we're checking our own work, which is also very important. So you need to customize them. You need to figure out what is really important for you. I mean, first of all, in our case, for the client, which are their primary potential pain points, which are the primary pitfalls, which are the most dangerous things, because it could be a minor mistake leading to dramatic consequences. And create a metric based around these things, asking the right questions. When we come to language industry, and I'm going, if you let me, obviously, expand on a totally different topic, introducing metrics in our real life that would be, I would say, more relevant for wider circles and wider areas, not just to localization or language industry. But when it comes to language, we're talking not about mundane errors that we used to measure accounts, say, 20 years ago, like how many typos have we made, how many dual spaces, how many capitalization errors, tag errors, and many others. Actually, you as a consumer who's, say, reading the text or working with an application or playing a game are not as much interested in those minor things as far as they're not overwhelming. If there are too many typos, you'll get annoyed. But you'll deal with, say, a few here and there. It's not important. But when it comes to really important things, that is, it distorts the meaning. You can hardly understand what they're talking about. It's too technical. That is, it's supposed to be technical. But once again, it sounds cryptic and only understandable to those in the know, and so on and so forth. That is really important because you need to be able to read it or consume it, if it's multimedia content, easily. You need to be able to understand it, once again, easily. And this is a different thing. You can easily read something, but then you understand nothing because it sounds smooth, but is incomprehensible. It was written by a techie. And then you also need to make sure that what you are reading or consuming in a language different from the original is also adequate to what they try to say, and not just word by word, but the meaning and the message and the tone of it. And that's just the start of it.
Okay. So to summarize, what I'm hearing you say is, a lot of the metrics traditionally didn't really focus on what the consumer would consider to be important topics or items. What you're saying is you should focus on what matters. Okay, is the text accurate? Is it readable, and is it understandable? How do you measure those, though? I mean, it's really easy to spot typos, to punctuation errors, capitalization, things like this. You can automate those, right? But when you come to these items that you're talking about, it almost sounds like you need to have a human in the loop to do part of that evaluation. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's partially true. Absolutely. That's the thing, because we're humans. Let's not forget about people who consume it, because at the moment, well, at least I hope so, we're not producing content for robots or for AI to consume. At the moment, they are not among the customers, or at least, say, the target audience, as software manufacturers and game publishers tend to name them. So yes, we need to evaluate it using human values. That is what is most important. Or if you revert the question, what is most annoying? What would make you feel that you are underestimated, that the software or a game or any other content does not fulfill its purpose, that it's not targeted at you because they want you to spend as much time working or consuming it as you can? What are you dissatisfied with most?
And again, but how do you measure that? Do you have external reviewers, or do you actually do like a survey with the end users? And again, no matter who you use, you are going to get a subjective feedback versus an automated, like, hey, we got this many typos. That's objective. Okay. But you're talking about is kind of, there is a bit of subjectivity there. And where do you collect that feedback from? And how do you ensure that it's, go ahead.
Perfect question. Well, first of all those holistic evaluations I'm talking about, obviously you got it right. They are not completely objective, which doesn't mean they're completely subjective. As far as you have formulated the goals properly, set the metrics, and created scales that allow human beings to be more or less objective and uniform in their evaluations. By that, I mean that if I put 2 people to the job, or even 10 people to the job, but they're using strictly defined metrics, say evaluations between 0 and 10, with 0 being absolutely atrociously horrible and 10 being perfect. But the main question is, everybody understands what's absolutely horrible and what's perfect. How is 5 different from 6? So you need to formulate it. You need to create a scale that very carefully and explicitly and clearly defines what's the difference. How do you assign those grades? Which is the key question here. As far as it's absolutely arbitrary, say I ask you, Mark, can you evaluate how fluent this text is? But I do not give you any reference points. I do not give you a scale. You'll definitely use some improvised scale of your own based on your knowledge of the industry or your understanding of how bad or good this or that particular deviation or error is. But it would be highly subjective. Another person in your place would probably go for a different grade. When we formalize it and create a formal, well-defined metric with clear categories for each scale, for each what I call variable, then we have considerably better uniformity proven by experiment, because some clients wanted, say, the representatives of their target audience to use these metrics, and there were multiple people evaluating one and the same thing, like an online shopping experience or checkout experience or goods return experience and some other things. And they were quite close. Their grades, obviously, they were not identical because people are different, but they were within the so-called Gaussian curve. That is, most of them fell within a certain range, not very wide range, from the expected average. So even if it's a single person doing this evaluation, we know that they will most probably produce something that's trustworthy and veritable as far as they're competent enough. And the other part of it, the reverse side of the coin, if I may, is that obviously you need to select people with the right qualification. And right qualification doesn't mean that they need to know something in depth. If it's, say, an online shopping platform, they just need to represent the target audience. For example, the case that we've done a couple of years ago, I'm obviously not going into details due to NDAs, was a shopping platform that mostly specialized in clothing items for women. And their target audience, the one that was supposed to spend most time and money on this platform, were women between 25 and 40. So we needed to select representatives from that particular group and say things like special education or their education level or whatever didn't play a role, because all people go shopping, irrespective of their education level or their salaries or whatever. I mean, their needs may differ, but still. In other cases, when you are reviewing a computer game or, say, a software interface, it's totally different. But once again, it's not always special knowledge. Sometimes it's just the experience or an age group or a certain educational level, depending on the target audience. And I'm not talking about very special cases where obviously you need an expert.
So again, to recap, some type of metrics is a must-have, and you need to not just take the generic ones, but focus on ones that are meaningful and relevant to the project that you're working on. And then you need to have reviewers. You need to have a review process or I guess platform. I could be process in place. The reviewers need to understand it, and they should have some. They should be relevant to the profile of the end user. Okay, so that all makes a ton of sense. I one more question on this topic, and then I'd like to move on. You know, again, my experience is a lot of times customers would have just those basic, you know, what's our word count? What's the monthly spend? You know, and then maybe quarterly we would do a quality assessment, and it was all generic stuff. And it, you know, and I guess we once in a while would make recommendations, not as in depth as what you're talking about here. Do these metrics, is it collaborative in terms of what you agree to use? Or are you making these recommendations? And if you are making the recommendations, do the customers ever push back and say, nah, and then you have to convince them that this is what's really important?
Another very good question, which obviously points to your long history with the industry. Because few people ask the right questions. So first of all, we have this in mind because some clients are very budget conscious, and it's not only the budget. Sometimes it just takes too long and they haven't got this time. So we need to take all considerations into account, including their budget, the time frame they are ready to spend, the amount of effort they are ready to spend on their part, because sometimes they want their own reviewers or independent reviewers to be used. And also their actual needs, because sometimes we need to explain to them what is so really important. Once again, some customers are ready to engage because they think, oh, okay, we can finally measure what we actually need, rather than something standard that's offered to us, but doesn't very much reflect our priorities. So coming back to the budget and timing restrictions, we made the whole model scalable. And let's not forget, yes, it's mostly at the moment human-based, not all of it, but most of it, because it's human experience. It's not just a simple thing. But from another hand, first of all, you can scan through something. So not all content requires you to go word by word very diligently. And once again, see, marking minor mistakes take more time than producing a general evaluation. For example, you read a page and you can read it quite quickly versus you are trying to mark all the tiny minor deviations from grammar, spelling, terminology, and everything. So first of all, it's faster by design. Second, you can go deeper, or you can use a really multidimensional metric, or you can reduce the number of primary criteria to maybe 2 or 3, as far as we are talking about something that needs to be judged quickly and with a budget-oriented angle. For example, we had one particular case with another online shopping platform where they wanted to go in depth and figure out where most of the problems come from, where the bad ads and any bad listing is the listing that doesn't attract customers, or where customers look at it and do not buy, or there are plenty of returns, which may be due to just the poor quality of the product or to an inadequate description, where it actually describes a totally different thing than they have in mind. So in that particular case, we had as many as 15 different criteria. And I'll explain. You may think that a product listing is something very trivial. You look at it and you figure out whether you buy or not. In reality, It's not. First of all, it's the heading. It's the thing that shows in your search criteria that should be catchy and that should reflect the major characteristics of something you're looking for. Second, it's the major selling points, whether they're clear enough, whether they emphasize product advantages, and where they describe everything. Then it's the mundane and boring things like the return policy, shipping policy, special disclaimers, say the item may stink when you unwrap it, but it will go away in a couple of days, but you need to warn your customers about it. Or there is something specific, you should be very careful when opening it, or something like that. So there, they wanted to figure out what their problem areas are. So we measured all those things. And this has nothing to do and nothing in common with, say, quality of the graphics, whether they are repeating and annoying, quality of videos, whether there are any, say, subtitles in the videos in a foreign language that the target audience doesn't understand and is annoyed by, or something written on the graphic pieces, once again in some foreign language, that typically doesn't attract people as much as lack of thereof. So there, but it was intentional. They wanted to figure out what the most problematic areas are, whether it's the quality, the structure of the ads, the catchiness of the headings, the overall adequacy of the description compared to the real goods advertised, or it's just the graphics or something like that. In another case, we needed a very basic comparison of MT versus MT edited by humans, that is MTPE, versus content created by humans. They wanted to figure out whether there is any gain in using MT or AI, and if there is, how can we quantify it? So there, the criteria were very simple. We were just comparing 2 primary factors, that is fluency, how easy it is to read or consume if it's multimedia, and adequacy. That is, how closely does it reflect the actual meaning and message behind a certain passage.
Yep.
So in a sense, you can adjust it within a very, very wide range. And we obviously allow our customers to create their own if they know what they're doing, but we are there to advise them, and we would help them to customize it, obviously, because we have more experience with it. And also we have all the building blocks built over the years based on all the metrics we created. So sometimes we can create a product or a new custom metric based completely from scratch for a different subject matter area or a different task. And sometimes we can reuse up to 80% or 90% of, say, predefined components that we already have and feel are relevant.
Makes a lot of sense. I kind of want to jump tracks a little bit here. You mentioned earlier, you had alluded to the fact that metrics can also be used in our personal lives. Can you give some examples of metrics that you or people that you know use in their lives?
Absolutely. So I'll touch upon the subject that most probably is relevant for a wider audience. That is, how do you select your hardware? Meaning smartphones, tablets, laptops, PCs, and everything. And this is a charged subject because sometimes in that area, despite the fact that these are just gadgets, we're very opinionated and we get very emotional. So I decided, well, honestly, prior to our conversation, but trying to illustrate it for a wider audience, to create a metric. Because, I mean, we're talking about things that actually play the role of appliances. Mm-hmm. They're just the vacuum cleaners and the solder irons of the 20th century, nothing more. Because we need certain functions to be performed, and we need, first of all, obviously everyone, whether it's a business or you personally, is budget conscious, so we need to fit within a certain budget. But it's not the only thing. We also need reliability, redundancy, because, none of these particular gadgets live forever, and sometimes they just tend to die unexpectedly, not just because the battery is discharged, but because something is wrong with the hardware or operating system, or somebody spilled coffee in it, or something else happened.
Or because the manufacturer has some planned obsolescence. I mean, I'm sitting here with an iPhone, and the devices tend to last. But you remember a couple of years ago when Apple was degrading the performance of the battery, so that it would appear that, God, I got to get a new phone, which to me is, I mean, they got called out on it, and I think they burned a lot of goodwill. Hasn't hurt them in the, overall, I guess, but there is that kind of, that kind of thing that you should look at when you're going to purchase something. How willing is the manufacturer to support something until end of life versus saying, oh, sorry, that's out of service, got to get the upgrade?
Yeah, good question, because it's very, very relevant. And we see examples of that, not only with Apple, but with many other manufacturers, let's say like Microsoft, trying to make you upgrade because your older computer, which is absolutely and totally fine, is suddenly incompatible with Windows 11 because it doesn't have the TPM2 module, or many other examples. I mean, they're not alone there.
They will claim that it's a security issue. They will say, oh, it's not secure. You got to upgrade. It's out of service. It's not secure, which once it's out of service, it is not secure. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing is, we need some redundancy because when this particular item dies, you still need to work and you can be on the go. And we need to take into account the current typically hybrid way of working when people spend some time at the office, some time at home, some time on the road, and it could be an extended business trip. So you need your technology to last you through this business trip, even if something happens. Finally, sometimes for many people, you need a certain level of productivity, which means that even on the go, or at home, you need a big enough and bright enough screen with good resolution and many other things. It's not that, well, I mean, you can read your email from a smartphone for several hours, but that's not the way to work for any serious person unless you're a delivery guy who's just marking things as delivered. So for most of us, we need a bigger screen and some faster brains behind that screen. And I'm not talking about hours. I'm talking about the CPU, the GPU, the amount of RAM it has, and the size of the hard drive or the SSD. So there are several things. And then finally, we need to be mobile enough. Once again, taking into account that our lifestyles become more and more hybrid, we need to be able to take all of those gadgets on the road without breaking our backs. I mean, literally. So when you create this metric, and you need to satisfy all criteria, not just one of them, it's not just fitting in the budget, because obviously you can purchase a lot of junk, paying very little money, but it will not get you far. From another hand, you can get something that does the job perfectly, but costs much more than you're ready to pay. So from there on, I'll just go through very quick conclusions because we have limited time. So first of all, I mean, I know it's emotional. I know it's overcharge. But at this current level of development, all those nice and fancy, foldable smartphones are just toys. Because they have excessive bulk, lower reliability, incredible costs that goes into the stratosphere, and they're not good as tablets either because of this relatively small screen size and limited battery capacity. So, and then you ask me, okay, we're talking about the metrics. Okay, so the foldable is out of question. I mean, when it comes to a reasonable metric, not to an emotional decision. I know it's a cute toy. So what would you suggest? And I'd say, okay, a mid-range smartphone plus a mid-range tablet. Because currently, I mean, nowadays, even mid-range devices are fast enough. They have great screens. They do everything you need. The only other requirement for a mid-range phone is a good camera, because you're also taking photos and a lot of selfies in business environment to impress people on LinkedIn. But I mean, you can find a lot of mid-range smartphones that are fast enough for any reasonable task you may have in mind and has a very good camera, because most of them have very good cameras nowadays. It's not like 10 years ago. The good thing about it is, first of all, you get some redundancy, because even one device out of two is probably going to last through a business trip or something. Second, with a tablet, you have a much bigger screen, so you can actually read your email and read documents and figure out what's going on. And you can also watch movies nicely, not on your phone and not on this tiny foldable, which is typically, I mean, overall, it's like 7-something inches versus an easily 10 to 11 or 12 for a tablet. And it would cost you, I mean, even the combination of a mid-range phone and mid-range tablet will cost you much less than a single foldable phone, would be considerably more useful, more flexible, and redundant. So the other thing is, I mean, I'm just going through this. It's computer muscle. So we considered being anti-emotional, so we're going kind of mundane, budget, redundant, and whatever. But what about the other emotional item? Like a gaming laptop. Many of us like to game. And you think, okay, a gaming laptop is perfect because it's portable, it's very powerful, it's the champion of both worlds. And it even works for people who run graphic intensive or video intensive tasks because it's got a great GPU. Not so much when it comes to think of it from a metric viewpoint, not from an emotional viewpoint, that you have the coolest gaming laptop on the market. They tend to be power hungry. They have huge power breaks. I personally had one where the PC was very small. It was 13.3 inches and it only weighed 3 pounds. That is around 1.5 kilograms. But its power break was another pound and it was huge. It was more like a real brick. So what's the purpose? So they are power hungry. They do not last that long, obviously, because they're very powerful. They're heavier and they're also very expensive.
You sound, now you have your doctorate of math and physics hat on and are doing everything in a very logical, rational manner. The reality is, though, that many purchases are emotional, for prestige reasons, for comfort reasons, for my friends have it, so I want to have it reasons. I live in Seattle, and I'm surprised at how many people have these huge pickup trucks that never use the bed
for the blink.
Yeah, they're using it as a commuter car. They have nothing in the bed, in the back, and they sit up high, and they have a pickup truck, and that's part of their identity, you know. And so everything that you said, totally makes sense. And especially in a business situation, if I was doing business with you, I would want to go through those, because on a business thing, I think in business, we want to remove as much emotion and relationship, relationships in the decision-making process, because I'm not going to buy from you because we're friends. I don't want to buy from you, for any other reason than it makes sense for what my business, requires. Right. And so everything that you just said makes sense. But in our personal lives, we're a mess, man. We're just, we've got the monkey brain, and the monkey brain says, I want that. And so that's why.
Well, a very good friend of mine, I'm part of the Audiophile Society.
Okay.
People who spend enormous amounts of money on their equipment, some of them, and I know these people personally, I'm not just creating it or just say using some abstract examples. So these people have spent more on their audio equipment than on their house.
Wow.
Some
That's
I'm not
they have
kidding.
very, very, very understanding spouses.
Yes, or no spouses.
Or no spouses, right?
Yeah. By the way, I'm debating, but it's a funny topic, because among other factors where people talk about expensive elite audio equipment is the wife acceptance factor.
Okay. The wife acceptance.
Because if the speakers are especially big, especially heavy and ugly, the wife acceptance factor goes somewhere to the floor.
Right.
Yeah, somewhere to the floor. So, going back, you are totally right. And I really love this discussion because you introduced some additional, I would say, vigor into this discussion. Obviously, many of us are emotional. And one of the guys in this society, we were talking, once again, I'm not contemplating this. We were talking about a work of art, beautiful vinyl player from a well-known niche Japanese brand that cost, and just I hope you're sitting tight, around $80K.
Wow.
Dollars.
It's not coming into my house, man. I can tell you the wife is
not here.
The wife acceptance factor. It would go down after about 1,000. So 80,000, that'd be, yeah.
Yeah. So and then another guy, he's older than me, so he maybe has a different perspective. But what he said are two things. So first of all, our major principle in America is what you want is what you need. Yeah, well, obviously he was ironic, but I really like that phrase.
Yeah.
I'm repeating it often. And second, what he said, you can look at it not as just an appliance that plays vinyl records, but as a work of art. And the price of a work of art is a totally different thing. You can spend as much as you like on a work of art if you really want it, like a true collection.
And if you really want to put your sales hat on, you got to convince your wife that it's not only is it a work of art, it's also an investment.
Yeah. But going back to the pragmatic part, you are totally right. A lot of decisions we make, and not only we, say, as businessmen or as private people or whoever, even our government makes ridiculous emotional decisions.
Yes.
More often than not. And we have to live with it, including the consequences. And I know that I'm putting on another hat of a lifestyle coach, but the thing is, obviously, we can stay emotional. We can look at our empty wallets or empty our savings accounts. But if we want to live healthier lifestyles, have more money in the bank, and overall feel more content and happy, and also cover up for all those redundancy situations when your dog has done something to your phone, and whatever else, or you have spilled coffee on your favorite tablet or very expensive laptop. So before that happens, we may think about trying to approach it more from a metric-centered approach rather than emotional approach. And I'm not saying that everyone is going to be convinced. I'm not saying that everyone will follow. It's just the same in our language industry or any other industry. You try to explain to clients what is most important for them, what you would like to measure. And then, in an ideal situation, you would ask for their feedback because on their end, they also know what's important for them. Many things will probably overlap, but some are unique. So in the best case scenario, you work together on an optimal metric to figure out what the quality of services or goods or overall proposition is, and how do we measure it in the most economical and straightforward and clear way, not only to measure it, but to improve it for the future, just to make the right decisions. Once again, not for everyone. Some clients are not interested and will never understand it. Some clients are ready to cooperate and are interested a lot. Some of them just need something in the middle. That is, they want a good proposition from you with a metric that you think will serve them well because you're the expert. And they are ready to use it because then they'll be able to scratch their head and say, okay, maybe we need to switch to a different supplier, or maybe we need to improve documentation of the checkout process here because many people are bothered with it, or maybe we need to improve the wording in our explanations and documentation because we perfected those sales brochures, but we didn't think that users will be mystified by certain user guide descriptions. They'll be overwhelming our support line.
No, I agree with everything you're saying. One thing though, on the personal side, when I'm making a major purchase, one of my go-tos is consumer reports. I like to get into the weeds and look at all of the supposedly non-biased and non-influenced reviews. I also go online and look at a lot of reviews, no matter what I'm buying. If it could be a book, it could be, I don't care, a pan. I want to see what the reviews say. And I know that they're gamed sometimes, oftentimes. But I like to see that. And this something that you didn't bring up earlier when you were talking about those two different retail platforms or online shopping platforms that you mentioned. You looked at the headline, you looked at the text, you looked at the unique selling points or the key selling points. I'm surprised you didn't say we also looked at the reviews, because I think a lot of purchasers base their decision on the reviews. So let me ask you that as a last question, and then I want to transition to AI. So when you're working, because reviews tend to be user-generated content, and the translation doesn't need to be perfect. People want to see the number of stars and the rationale. Do you do any kind of like a UGC localization? And if so, what is like one or two key best practices related to translating UGC?
First of all, I didn't mention user-generated content or, say, user reviews on purpose. Because when, say, people design or try to improve their online shopping platform or their content platform or their cloud software, they are talking about things they can improve. User-generated content typically deals with what they purchased. It's not the platform. It's not the service. Gotcha. They're typically talking about their experience with whatever they purchase. So it's a different aspect. It doesn't mean that people do not measure that, but that's a totally different thing. That's a different goal with I would say completely specific goals in mind. And UGC, as we've already defined, the abbreviation is extremely important for your reputation, for you when you are selecting goods and reading reviews. I'm doing the same thing. I go through Amazon. Obviously, I ignore the Vine reviews. I only use reviews from those who purchased it. And if they are specific enough, they point to the authenticity of the review. I pay more attention than to something that's very non-specific and could be generated by AI. And, many of those companies, they create artificial purchases that are totally real on Amazon or any other platform, but are actually part of their marketing effort to create fake reviews. And sometimes they even pay the reviewers a little, or they provide them goods for free. But that way, when it's, say, not part of Amazon Vine or something similar on a different platform, it means that it's not traceable, and you need to be the filter and the judge of its authenticity. But, yes, UGC is extremely important, and given that a lot of content is generated by AI nowadays, and it's correct, you do not need it to be perfect. And that's exactly why our holistic, multidimensional metrics work in this environment. They are not targeted at particular mistakes. They are targeted at the impression, but the most important part that I didn't mention earlier on purpose, and that you actually helped me emphasize, is that the most important part here, that you also, for any criterion, you use the acceptance threshold. I'll use an illustration. So if you're creating a marketing brochure, it should be perfect. I mean, perfect. It's a short document that you polish, 3 times in a row. Then it goes through an editor, then it goes through a proofer. And say, if we judge it on the criteria of fluency or adequacy, that is, it conveys the message and the meaning, it should be close to 10 on a 0 to 10 scale. Maybe 9 is acceptable, but for a marketing material, 8 is something that's questionable, whether you've polished it enough. At the same time, and you use the same measurement, the same criterion, but you're talking about a regular, say, user guide. There, our expectations are moderate. A user guide written by a human. So we say, okay, we do not need perfect because it would cost a lot. Let's say that 7 to 8 is fine, is where our expectations are. I'm not diving into details what those 7 or 8 means, but once again, on our scales, they would mean a very particular thing, and you would be able to distinguish clearly between 7 and 8. But this is the area we're targeting, because it's more affordable, but still provides an adequate level of quality. And then we're talking about, say, the Q&A or the support database that's mostly generated or translated by MT because the volume is huge. Something is added or changed every day, and it's just not manageable and not affordable to use human translation. It doesn't make sense. There, once again, it's the same criterion, but your goal is even more humble. You just want it to be understandable to a level that it really helps the user, that they do not have to switch to a different language and read the original if they know it at all. So there, we would be considerably more humble and said, okay, if it reaches the level of 4 or 5, that is, it's generally comprehensible and the user can get what they want and figure out what this article talks about, that's good enough. Which is a kind of a consensus, because users do not expect perfect quality from long support databases or explanation of various tickets that have been logged in the past either. So that's it. So we adjust the acceptance threshold, and that way we can deal with AI-generated or MT-generated or MT-assisted content easily, and it's exactly the same approach. Nothing changes. It's just the acceptance threshold, and once again, it depends on how exposed the material is, on how important it is, and what are the implications of something slipping through the cracks.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, God, we went deeper on that one topic than I expected. We haven't even touched on AI. I think we'll save that to our next conversation. What I would like to ask you to kind of wrap things up here is, obviously, you're a very highly educated individual. You're a business owner.
Oh, thank you. I'm blushing.
Oh, yeah. Where do you go to continue to learn both professionally, and that's the local industry type related. It doesn't have to be in the industry, but it could be technologies or processes, etc., that will affect our industry. It could be related to what your customers do. Where do you go for your professional ongoing education, and where do you go for your personal development?
Great questions. So you would be surprised. One source that I almost never read are publications from our industry. Because typically I do not want to sound harsh, but typically they feel shallow, rather narrow-minded, and the biggest issue is I do not learn much new from these publications. And this defeats the purpose. So I'm mostly interested in technology, so I read some popular things that then I delve deeper. But in my case, the most value I get is from playing with those things. If I want to learn about AI, okay, I'm not an expert, say I'm not a designer who's creating the prototypes for the client to select from or something like that. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation and talk more about AI, where it works, where it doesn't, because my view of this thing, based on the real business my company does, differs dramatically from what we read in popular articles. And that's an interesting topic by itself. So the thing is, I need to play with it because I need to get the grasp of it. And the reason is, as a CEO, I need to understand whether what people are telling me or what clients are telling me reflects the actual situation.
Yeah.
Because you need to make the decisions. And if you blindly trust someone, I mean, it could be a very well-intended and competent person, but sometimes their world outlook is somewhat skewed, sometimes significantly skewed because of particular experience or lack thereof. So I like to play with it a little on my own. Experience this. Just figure out how user-friendly it is, what it does for me, what it doesn't. So I try to play with those things, and I try to read more about various areas of technology. And this goes hand in hand with my natural curiosity. So I like to hear things about technology in general, whether it's new sources of greener and more sustainable energy or electric cars. I really hope that my next car is going to be electric. Sorry, and I'm postponing purchasing a new car. Once again, I'm not into the blink factor. So I can postpone it, but I want to contribute it. Plus, I'm just fascinated by new technologies. I want to experience it by myself, not as a test drive, but as a real thing. Hopefully it's user-friendly enough. And many other things. So I read articles on technology, on science advances, on energy and climate change, obviously, on AI, a lot. And I'm trying to experiment with other things. And plus, when I can afford it, I buy simple gadgets that I can also experiment with so I can make better judgment next time, or provide useful reviews for the others. Including anything. I mean, even the banking industry, when it comes to business, has evolved significantly. And nowadays, our preferred solutions are totally different. And that's a topic for another day. Yeah. But it's very important for people making real decisions.
So, yeah, you said a couple things there that resonate with me. One is, you have a natural curiosity. And I think that's super important. I don't care how old you are, how much experience you have. If you don't have that curiosity, you're not going to grow, you're not going to develop, and you're going to get blindsided by something at some point. The other thing you said is experiment, play around with things. I also think that, surrounding yourself by other people who are subject matter experts in something you want to learn helps. Podcasts help, I've got a couple of favorites. But there's just so much to learn. And I think that anybody who doesn't have a strategy for learning, well, you're going to fall behind, If you want to focus all your time on entertainment, instead of for me, learning is entertainment. It's the best entertainment because it's additive to me. And I believe in compounding returns. You mentioned the banking system. Compound interest is one of the great wonders of the world, but I think you can get compound returns on your physical conditioning. Like if you are training, after a while, you get the improvement goes like this, and you can get massive compound returns intellectually when you start looking at different technologies and processes. And then all of a sudden you're able to kind of picture how you can use certain things in different contexts. You get that kind of intellectual compounding. So, I'm with you on that, man. And I would really enjoy to keep this conversation going, but we try to keep these episodes under an hour. So that means I'm going to have to get you back on memoQ Talks maybe a couple months from now. And by that time, I'll be back on coffee. This is just water. And,
perfect. Can I summarize? I have a great quotation from one of the older members of the Audiophile Society.
Summarize, please.
The guy's retired. And he said, you know what? When you sit on a couch, watch TV, and lose curiosity, it means that you're already dead.
Period. That's it.
Yes.
I agree.
It's succinct, clear, and up to the point.
Totally. Well, on that positive, upbeat point, Leonid, no, I've again really enjoyed this conversation, and we could go on for, I'm sure, easily another hour just when we get talking about AI. So let's table that for now. Thank you so much for being on memoQ Talks, and I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and you were asking some of the best questions I've ever heard during interviews.
Oh, now you're making me blush
and
now.
Contributing the piece, and contributing the pieces I really enjoyed. And everybody who knows me better knows that I'm a rather straightforward and honest guy.
Awesome.
So I try not to praise people. I can be neutral. I can stay neutral, but I never praise people if I really do not like what they're saying.
Well, thank you. I can use my self-esteem can always use a little more praise. So thank you so much. I hope to see you in person one day soon. And until then, you take care.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.